Hi everybody, it's Sandy here with a technique refresh coloring night scenes. I've done that before and it's time to try it again in a different kind of way. And I'm also part of the Caring Hearts blog hop to collect cards with letters in them for elderly in nursing homes. You can click on my blog link to get more information about that. This is a Christmas card that I made when I was at a retreat recently, and I had sat and doodled it and done some playing around while I was talking to other people, and I didn't write down anything, but it's this penny black stamp set, and I'm going to try, if I can, to recreate it. And I don't have the exact colors, I don't remember what I colored it with, but I'm going to try. And I also want to make it a larger image on a card because I had to cut the card base down for the other one. So I took my Copic multi-liner pen and just continued the lines of the stamp set, that little scene, across the card so I could make it bigger. I'm probably still going to trim down the card in order to make it, fit onto a card, but at least I'm gonna make it bigger in the first place. I wanted to make the background color a little more prominent because it's a little bit looking like a Aurora Borealis, which I don't even know if they have in the Middle East, but whatever. I thought it's pretty. And I want to make it a little bit more prominent than it was in the first card. So I started with a darker purple, a deeper, richer purple, and then a brighter purple in the middle, and wanted to see how that will all blend with those blues at the top. I think the one on the left had been a more muted purple. It might have even been a BV, but I'm not positive what exactly it was. I was just doodling and playing. So I'm also doing the background first on this one, where I know that I did the background last on the other one, and I ended up reworking because of the technique that I did messed up all the coloring on the image itself. So this time I'm going to go the other direction, knowing what I'm going to do in the background to create that little texture. So I'm just throwing all these colors in there, and there's going to be enough other things done to it that if it's not perfect, it's okay, because the texture I'm going to add is going to cover a lot of that. And I'm also going to add, I don't know if you can really tell, but there's this nice dark halo around the image itself, and that's what I really, really loved about this. And I almost considered doing a vignette from the outside with, from black all the way into the image, but I decided that was a little much, so I was just going to mount it on something black instead. So I'm starting with some dark blues. I'm going to add more blacks or warm grays to it later, but I want to get that halo started around it before I apply the technique for the texture to the whole thing. So I'm taking my really dark color, and I've got the colors listed in the bottom right this time because I couldn't see it up in the upper left corner where I normally put it. So now it's disappearing in the lower right corner, but hopefully you can see what the color numbers are. And I'm just going to add a little bit more of a few other colors to try to stretch out that shadow and make it a little bit softer. And I kind of keep going back and forth between a couple different markers. I finally found my B97 because that one had gone AWOL. Sometimes they hide in my giant Copic bag. So adding a little bit more to the whole thing to just get some more color in this. And then I'm going to smoosh it around and try to do a little bit more blending. And again, I'm going to allow some of those lines, that striation, to be there because then it's going to look more like an Aurora Borealis. And add a little bit more of that blue down toward the bottom to feather some of that out. And there will be more color added. So this is just the first treatment of all of that. I'm also going to treat the sand with the same technique. So I want to get the color in there first. And this is my E34 marker, and it's starting to dry out. So I just kind of put one coat of it, and then I'm going to switch to another color. That's one of the great things about having all of the markers, even though you don't really need them when they're this close in color to each other. But I can switch over to my E55 that happens to have more ink in it and finish out the coloring, smoothing it out a little bit more, and not having to get my lazy butt over to the drawer to try to find the re-inker. Now here is the technique part. This is colorless blender in a mini mister bottle, and I'm just going to spritz it, and I'm going to let it sit, and then I'll spritz it again, let it sit, and you can see that texture starting to appear. All that color lightens, and we're getting all these little dots and this little kind of visual texture in it. and it's going to continue to lighten up as it sits here. So while that happens, I am going to start coloring the image itself. I'm going to color Mary, and I'm not leaving a whole lot of light area or whites on this in particular, because I'm going to add those back in at the end instead of adding them in by just leaving them blank, because I wasn't really positive if I liked the amount of light that I had in the one on the left, so I decided I was going to try it this way. And I'm using some BG7s for Mary, and then the hair and her hair and Joseph's robe, his outer robe at least, are going to be the same colors as the sand, because I want to try to tie all the colors together across the card, and I try to do things like that to keep some of the colors consistent and not add too much on an image like this, because I didn't want it to get too crazy. It's got a real vintage feel to it, and I wanted to keep that by not adding a ton of color, because back in the old days when they would do hand-colored art on ads and that kind of thing, and in magazine pictures and things, they would use the same colors because they didn't have access to a bajillion colors on things. So I wanted to try to keep that limited palette. So I'm even using the same greens on the blanket as I did on Joseph. It's probably a YG on the left side, and or at least a YG9 something maybe, and it's a YG6 on the right. So yeah, it's not exactly the same colors, but I didn't realize that until after I started coloring, so I left it. The donkey and Joseph's hair are going to be in the warm gray family. And then I'm going to do some kind of darkish colors for the skin on the adults, and I'm going to add just a little tiny bit of E01 and let the baby's face be bright. You can't really tell until you look at the card up close, but the little bright face on the little baby makes it stand out more. And you can tell when you look really up close. So now I'm going to start taking my dark W marker. And I could even go darker than this, but for now I'm just going to start with the W7. And I'm just going to add some real strong shadows because the light's coming from the upper right, and I want to create some real darkness. I could have done it with browns, but as I did in the previous video, it's certainly possible to just do it with grays. And so I'm adding a little bit of gray on top of a bunch of these different colors, and giving my donkey some really good shading and blend him out a little bit so that he gets a little bit softer and that color blends more. And then I don't want his belly to be white. It'll appear white when it's in contrast to all these other dark colors around him, but his belly would be in shadow, so it's going to have some gray in it. And next I want to add more grays to Mary. And now, do you remember how dark that blue was that was around them in the halo? Look how light it got now that I've sprayed it, and I'm adding more color to the inside. It just really softens, so that's going to have to be strengthened up considerably. But I thought I'd point that out before I start working on that, so you can definitely tell the difference that it disappeared a little bit. So I'm adding back some of the highlights with a 0 marker and just lightening up some of those areas. I'm going to do more of that with a white pen at the very end, but I want to make sure that I soften up some of those highlight areas in the first place. You can do that with a white pencil or something instead if you don't have a colorless blender, or if you want to try to give it a sharper white. And now I'm taking my C10, that's almost a black marker, and I'm giving it a super heavy black outline. And it's going to give it a lot of contrast and make it pop out from that background in this sort of vintage way. And I'm making it a fairly thin line because I don't want it to get just giant black and heavy. And now I'm going in with my next one down, which is a C8, and I'm adding it in an odd fashion. I'm not adding it evenly everywhere so that some areas get darker, some areas are lighter. And then I'm going to gradually step out the colors lighter and lighter so that I can start to soften that blending all the way around the entire image. And just loosen that up stretch the color out a little further with a C2 and just blend it very, very lightly, very, very gently so that it's real soft by the time I'm all done. And so next I'm even going to take that B95 again and blend that back into the background, into that blue that we had started out with. So now I need to do the same thing to the bottom and the feet area and add that a little bit of that strength. Doesn't have to be as much, but I want to add some gray to the shadows so that that'll have more contrast to it as well. And then the camera ran out of batteries. So you're just getting the picture of the card, which I think you can see the comparison of the two. It came out really well. It's not exactly the same, but I think I've got the general idea. And here's the finished card itself, which I put on a regular size card base. It's just on black. And the sentiment that I added, I did shading along the side of that sentiment panel just to make it match. So thank you so much for taking a few minutes to watch this. Be sure to click on my blog link to go see about the Caring Hearts blog hop. And you can watch the Coloring a Night Scene video that's linked here if you'd like, or check out something else. And I will see you guys next time. Take care and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.